this course will be covering Apache Spark and a programming language called Scala. So I'm sure you guys must have heard a lot about Scala, especially these days. It's gaining a lot of foothold, especially in the big data domain. So what programming languages are you guys familiar with? You just want to have a good idea of the audience I'm dealing with so that I can optimize my content accordingly. So I assume everybody is good with Java, right? C++, okay. You guys are happy with Java and C++, is it? I mean, you don't have any pain points whatsoever with your programming language? You guys have any qualms or complaints about whatever programming language you're using?
Yeah, the pain points maybe, the error handling.
Okay, okay.
And writing a lot of code.
Exactly.
Like repeated code, yeah.
Exactly. So let's say that you want to iterate over a list of items. The amount of code you have to write is really enormous. You have to write like 20 lines in Java, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's one thing which is addressed by Scala. So that's one of the things. So what is the paradigm for Java or C++? What programming paradigm do they encourage? Java encourages object-oriented programming, right? You must be aware of that. That is the feature of Java. I'm talking about the ideology of Java. Everything is an object. Even your main function is encapsulated in an object, and whatever you have to write a class for it. Even for let us say that you are doing a custom sorting, and you have a class which dictates the sorting policy. You have to write a class for that, and inside that you have to write an anonymous function. I'll come to the word count example in Scala. I'll show you how comparative it is with Java. So for doing the word count, you must have written approximately like 120 to 140 lines of Java, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So those were the pain points with Java. What are the good things about Java?
So when I say good thing, maybe comparing C, C++, it's easy to write.
Yeah, so Java doesn't have pointers. It handles your memory for you. You need not remember to delete things and clear up whatever miss you make. That is one thing. The second thing is if you're coming from a C++ background, you must be aware of the pain which people take to port the same application to different platforms. They have to write a lot of platform dependent code. So what the designers of Java thought was to eliminate platform as a dependency altogether. So they had a common layer on top of all platforms, the Java runtime, the JVM, which actually takes your Java code, compiles it into the platform understandable bytecode, and then runs the program for you. The cost here is it runs a little slower than native code because there is a layer in between, and it gets converted into machine language, but the advantages are enormous. So as we proceed towards more abstractions, we have to understand one thing. It is not the performance which matters anymore. It is only the developer complexity and time. Because you can cure the performance problem by throwing more processing power, because nowadays computing is very cheap. If you're working with big data, you know, right? You can spawn an EC2 instance within seconds, right?
Yes.
So back then it was not the case. That's why languages like C++ concentrated a lot on computing performance. But today, computing performance is a cheap resource. What is a costly resources is developers like you. It's very hard to find a guy who knows Java or a guy who knows. In fact, it's harder to find a guy who knows Scala. You guys must be knowing that. So the thing is, developer consideration should be given more importance than computing or performance. So that is exactly what Java addresses, and whatever Java failed to address, Scala is catching up there. So Scala took the best parts of Java and added more refinements to it. For example, they took the JVM dependency from Java. In fact, the guy who designed Scala, his name was Martin Odersky. He was also the guy behind Java generics. I'm sure if you're using Hadoop, you must be using a lot of generics, right?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, because we have a lot of types which we pass in map and reduced, which are heavily relying on Java generic code, right?
Yes.
So that generic architecture of Java was designed by the same guy who designed Scala. He was one of the committee members. The advantage of generics, it helps you eliminate boilerplate code. I mean, you need not write the same function again. Let us take an example of a find function, which takes an array and it takes a single element as an argument, 2 arguments. So the function, what it does is it iterates through the array, and then if it matches that element, and it returns the position or the element, otherwise it returns a null, right?
Yes.
So how different would this code be for a list of employees or a list of integers? It will all be the same, right?
Yes.
The algorithm or the implementation is independent of your data structure. This is exactly what generics tries to solve. You can do it in C also by using void pointers, but generics makes it very easy. It is unsafe to play with void pointers in C. You must be knowing that. So generics handles all that safety for you. It removes boilerplate code, and you have to write less code. For example, in your map, you pass the key and the value as generics only, right? Scala also takes the same school of thought as Java. Like how Java generics was, if you don't know, added in 1.5. Before that, we didn't have any generics in Java. So they kept on abstracting on top of Java and realized that Java could not take it any longer, because Java was heavily dependent upon the object-oriented paradigm a lot. Unfortunately, your object-oriented paradigm is not a very good representation or modeling of real-world objects, because things change state a lot. You cannot represent everything using objects. For example, we have 2 processes which are communicating, which is a very frequent scenario in distributed systems. For example, you must be aware of Zookeeper, right? People who have worked with Hadoop.
Yes.
Yeah, so in Zookeeper, there are 2 nodes which are trying to communicate with each other, and Zookeeper does a mediation. This is not a very good representation using object-oriented system, because the state keeps on being mutated very frequently, because the node might go down, it may come up at a different time state, and it might hold a different set of values. So for example, a node A pings to node B and then waits for a response. Before that, node B goes down and nobody is there to receive that ping. So these kind of concurrency and parallelism issues are also addressed by Scala, and they are imbibed in the language itself, which we'll be seeing in the forthcoming sessions. The main point which I'm trying to drive at is what is the reason for inventing another language? One, you have to improve upon your abstractions. You have to handle main things like concurrency, you should not complicate the developer's time, and you should save it. So like I told, developer time is more precious than processor time. And you have to introduce more abstractions and make the language less verbose. One of the main complaints with Java was it was very, very verbose. So Scala addresses that, which we'll be seeing very shortly. And the third thing is, if you want to rope in all Java programmers to Scala, that's what their ultimate aim is. One thing you have to realize is you should have a lot of backward compatibility. Otherwise, people are going to rewrite the same thing what they wrote in Java in Scala also. For example, the MapReduce paradigm is really very popular. So let us say that a new language promises the same thing in a faster way. People are not really going to change very fast unless it provides backward compatibility. Otherwise, you have to write your whole system again from scratch, which is a very costly affair for companies. I'm sure you guys must be knowing a lot of times where your organization takes a decision not to rewrite something because it's not cost effective. So one of the main things Scala engineers took into consideration was you have to maintain backward compatibility. So in a sense that whatever library you have written in Java, you can interoperate it without any hiccups safely in Scala. You read, guys?
Okay.
So if you've written a library in Java and you include that jar in your class path, you can call those functions or APIs or interfaces in Scala without any problem at all. Your code is going to be 100% okay. It will compile fine. You can even deploy it in production. That is one important consideration. So you maintain backward compatibility. 2, to reduce the verbosity. We already talked how verbose Java was, so Scala actually addresses all those problems and increases a lot of abstractions which are not seen before in other programming languages. So second point was to decrease the verbosity of Java code. Third is Scala had to be dependent on the JVM. This is again an extension of the first point. Only if you are dependent on the JVM, we can run code which is compatible with Java. There is one more reason for being dependent on the JVM. Otherwise, you end up being the same language as C++, right?
Okay. Yes.
So you have to again write platform dependent code. You have to make code tweaks to make it run on Windows. You have to make code tweaks to make it run on Mac OS. So what happened is they wanted to avoid all this again, and they didn't want to go back in time and make the same mistakes. So they made Scala on top of JVM. There are other implementations of Scala also which exist. They run on top of your .NET runtime. There is another popular alternative for people who use .NET and C# out there. And there are even native implementations of Scala using a compiler framework called LLVM. If you're interested about other Scala implementation, you can Google for Scala LLVM and find out. So the third thing was maintaining compatibility with JVM. And the fourth thing was they wanted Scala to be easily understood by developers. I mean, we spend most of the developer time reading code than writing it, if you guys realize it. I mean, the whole software life cycle, most of the time is spent in maintaining software. Maintaining software means reading other people's code, understanding it, and then writing your own bug fixes or implementations or test cases. So very important consideration is your code should be easy to read. When I read your code, it should read like plain English, and I should be able to understand what exactly you're trying to do. Java exactly does not allow that. You guys must be knowing. So it'll be like 100, 500 lines of code, and then what this guy would have done ultimately is, you know, copy a list from one collection to another. So these kind of things, they must be readable like plain English language. So Scala put a lot of importance to make your code as readable as possible. So they introduced language constructs which make your code as readable as possible. So that is one more consideration which Scala people took into account. So these are the design considerations which were taken when building Scala. And if you guys are aware of behavioral testing, BDT, behavior driven testing, I'll be talking about that a lot in our Scala sessions. BDT, Scala has got very good BDT support. BDT is nothing but it's a type of testing where like unit testing or integration testing, wherein you test a system against its features. Like for example, if you are testing a calculator, you specify your test case like this. If I give 1 + 1, then it should print 2. So you literally specify the system in terms of its behavior and expected output instead of writing test case code. That's what BDT means. Scala is a big advocate of BDT, and BDT is the biggest productivity hack in agile programming. So a lot of agile companies which are advocating test-driven development use behavioral-driven testing, and behavioral-driven testing is something which was almost invented by Scala. So once Scala introduced behavioral-driven development, a lot of other languages and frameworks started copying the same model, and they've gained a lot of benefits from that. So BDT is again a unique feature of Scala. You don't have it natively in Java. You have to make it work. But in Scala, you get it out of the box. That is one unique feature of Scala.
Is it like a JUnit in Java or something different?
Like I told you, it's not like giving specific unit test cases. I'll just show you guys. Hold on. Yeah. So this is a test case, which is BDT in Scala. If you read it, it sounds like plain English. I mean, even a QA guy can write a test case in Scala. So it is a BDD for a stack. Okay, so stack should be able to pop values in last in first out order. So they've written a test case for that. A stack should. This is a perfectly valid Scala code. If you guys see, it reads like plain English, right? You guys know the difference between compiled and interpreted languages, right?
Yeah.
So can you give me an example of a compiled language?
Compile like Visual Basic are the quite old language, like it will compile page by page. COBOL.
I think you mean interpreted language. Java is an example of a compiled language. Yeah, C++ is again one more example of a compiled language. You guys have heard of Python?
Yes.
Python, JavaScript, Ruby, all these are interpreted languages. There is an old language called BASIC. I'm not sure you guys have heard of it. Back in my days I used to code in BASIC. BASIC is another example of a interpreted languages. So what is the difference between compiled and interpreted language? And interpreter, yeah, that's exactly correct. Interpreter, not until that line comes you will get that error. So it will just throw an error at that line and then quit the program. That's a very good example. Okay. So what is it? So interpreted languages, that means they should never exist, right? They have so much disadvantage. They don't have even a single advantage compared to a compiled language, right? So what is the advantage of an interpreted language? In interpreted language, you are writing code, compiling, building, and deploying cycle is very, very less. You just imagine that you have to, if you open a Python file, you just have to type it and then run it. And then if there is an error, it's going to show. But in case of Java, you have to write it, compile it, build it, and then run it. And then if you find an error, again you have to go to that line, type it, compile it, run it. If you see, it looks very trivial. But what if you're doing like 50, 60 times a day? Yeah. Which is what we do, right? Yes. Yeah, it is. Like let us say that you take 1 minute for compiling. You guys know how long it takes to compile big files, right? So if you take 1 minute for compiling, it's going to take, let's say you do it like 100 times every day, you're almost wasting 2 hours. So that's a lot of developer time getting wasted, right? So there is a huge disadvantage for compiled languages and an advantage for interpreted languages. The read, eval, and print loop of, we call it read, eval, print loop in developer terminology. It's called REPL. I'm just pinging it. So REPL of interpreted languages is much smaller than compiled languages. So that is the main reason why people use compiled languages for prototyping. Because prototyping, you need something very fast. You're not bothered about performance or optimization. You just need to hook up something and then show it for a demo. So that is one advantage for interpreted languages. Now, can you name me a language which can be interpreted as well as compiled? I mean, whenever we want it. Let us assume that there is a dream language where while prototyping I can follow the interpretation mode, and then when deploying it I can follow the compiling mode. It would be great, right? Yeah, that is Scala is one such language. You can use your code and interpret it. You can take your code and then compile it also. Like Java C, there is a Scala C which can be used for compiling it into a class file. And then there is a Scala executable, which if you type Scala file name.scala, it's going to do the interpretation. So that is a huge productivity gain when it comes to Scala. This is something very unique to Scala. So we've seen 2 unique things which are cool. So what are all these unique things aimed at? Not for making a language cool, but they improve your productivity. So let us say that you are prototyping a web application in Scala. When you are testing it, you can have it in interpretation mode, and when you are deploying it, you can compile it into a jar and then deploy it. And then when you are writing test cases, you can write it like usual English language test cases, and it's very easy to write them, debug them, read them, and understand what failed, what didn't fail. So these are all aimed at enhancing developer productivity. One more unique thing which Scala introduces from a technical standpoint is functional programming. How many guys have heard of this? Functional programming, any idea? Java, if Java supports object-oriented programming, Scala says it's a big proponent of functional programming. So what exactly is functions? So when I say this language is an O-based language, in that language everything is object, and they remodel everything in the real world using objects. Scala supports objects, yes, but it brings in a lot of new concepts called functional programming. C is not exactly functional, it's a procedural language. Let me give you an example. What if you treat a function like you treat a variable? Can I have an array of functions? Can I pass a function as an argument to another function? Or can I return a function? I cannot do any of these in Java, or for that matter any language. In C, yes, we can do it using function pointers, but that's still a hack. What if, for example, this function, I can pass a function which can take these parameters. So in effect what I'm trying to say is your functions are first class objects, meaning they are treated the same way as variables are treated. I can have an array of functions. I can pass a function as a parameter to another function. I can make a function return a function. So what is the advantage of all this? What advantage do I get if I treat a function as a first class variable? Okay, it increases my abstractions. Why do we need abstractions? We can just do away with simple assembly language, right? Abstractions make you easy to code, makes your code easy to understand, right? C is an abstraction on top of assembly language, because assembly language is very hard to read, write, and understand. It's very hard to test also. If I give you a piece of assembly language, you won't even know what it does until you spend like an hour on it. So C++ is an abstraction on C. C does not have any classes or inheritance or virtual functions. So C++ introduces all those abstractions to C. So if you increase the number of abstractions, it increases developer productivity. So that is one more unique feature of Scala. So these three are the main unique features which make Scala a very worthwhile language to learn for developers. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the course,
really are we going to use in the real world? That is the question. Maybe even the feature.
Yeah, we use them in real. I'll give you an example. You guys have heard of design patterns, right?
Yes.
You've used them in real world, right?
Yes.
Okay. These design patterns, why are they not incorporated into the language itself if they are that important? You get my question? If something is really important, they can give it as a part of the language itself, right? Why are they not there? Like for example, Java has got singleton, factory, builder, and then command pattern. Why are these things not a part of your Java language itself? Like if they release Java 8, why can't they have a builder pattern in the syntax itself? Why is it not possible?
So maybe because when they go for
yeah, tell me, you have the answer.
When they go for higher versions, so they need to maintain the complexity, right?
No, design patterns have been there since 1980s.
Okay.
Because your existing language, they didn't have a way to implement this. For example, if you take singleton, Java does not have a way to implement singleton at all, because everything is inside the class and there is no global object at all. So how will you implement a singleton? So you have to find out a workaround for that. So design pattern is exactly a workaround which is made to hide a deficiency in your programming language. For example, you have a function, you have a. I just want to highlight this because one of you guys asked me a very important question. Are we going to use these in real life? Yes, we will be. For that, I have to illustrate what is the deficiency we have in terms of abstractions. For example, you have a constructor. You have so many constructors for building an object. Like for example, let us take a class which returns a pizza object. Okay. So you can have any number of constructors. It can have any number of toppings. It can have any number of bases. You guys, when you order pizza, you specify a lot of specifications, right? I want this topping. I want this particular cheese. I want this base. I want a handmade crust and all that, right?
Yes.
So all these you pass as. Let us say that you have an interface for this in Java. You have an object which returns a pizza instance. So you will take all these as constructor arguments, right?
Yes.
So you will have different constructors for all these, right?
Yes.
Well, let us say that the number of combinations is like 70. You cannot be having 70 constructors, right?
It will be very complex.
Yeah, that will be very complex. So how do you solve it? Design patterns come to your rescue. So what they do is they have a builder pattern which builds a pizza object depending upon whatever parameters you pass, so that you don't have to initialize like 70 combinations of constructors. So it saves you a lot of code, right? So if it is very cool, why is it not a part of your language? That's because they cannot incorporate it. It adds to the complexity. So Java has outlived its complexity. In case of Scala, if you are able to pass functions as first class arguments, you need not have the builder pattern at all in the first place. You can just pass a function which will create a pizza instance as an argument to another function, and then it will return the pizza instance. You need not have a builder pattern at all. Okay. So ideally, 20 years from now, there won't be any book on design patterns in Scala at all. Okay. Our motive is not to eliminate design patterns. Our motive is to make coding a simpler job by introducing more abstractions, right?
Okay.
So does that answer your question?
Yes, I got it.
So cool. You guys are convinced that we have to learn Scala. It will make you a better programmer, right?
Yes. Yes.
Cool. So we'll move on to Spark now. So any questions before that? No. I'll just be whizzing through Spark today. We won't be going into a lot of details. Apache Spark is actually a framework. Hold on, I'll just I have prepared a very basic slide for Spark. I'll share it with you guys. So I'll just be saying about brief introduction about Spark. I'll compare it with Hadoop and what are components Spark has got, and then some basic use cases. I'll just mention the use cases we'll be going. So I assume all of you here know Hadoop. So any problems with Hadoop? We develop a new system only we have problem with the existing systems. Otherwise, we never have to learn a new language or a framework or anything. One of the main problems I had when I was working with Hadoop was we have to think, yeah, it's not iterative, that is sort of what I'm arriving at. We have to think everything in terms of a map and a reduce. It's maddening, seriously. Have you guys felt that?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, let us say your job will be very abstract. Like it will be like an SQL query. I want to find out all the XML tags which start with which have the date tag, but the date should be greater than 28th of July. So, and you're given like 100,000 tags like this. How will you write a map reduce out of it? First, you have to think in terms of map reduce. Okay, how many mappers I'm going to have? How many reduces I'm going to have? So this will be a filter operation or not. Why can't we directly think in terms of straight like an SQL query? Has this ever occurred to you guys?
Yes,
You guys have,
like,
yeah, yeah, please.
yeah, actually, whenever we write a program, we are thinking of MapReduce in that, pattern like that. That is really a pain.
Yeah, that's a real pain. And you know what? You'll think for like 3-4 hours and then come up with a MapReduce program. The worst part is it won't work the way you think it will work. Something will happen. Like the reducer won't get the output, or the reducer will print everything the same as what map is printing. You'll get some incorrect count. I mean, many a times you won't even know that your program is not working correctly. And do you guys do any QA or testing on your MapReduce programs?
Yes.
I bet a lot of people don't do that.
The only way is we have to put some effort and go and see something.
Yeah, exactly. So these are some serious concerns with MapReduce. So what is the underlying problem? The problem is you have to think everything in terms of MapReduce. The main problem is, the actual problem is, there is no abstraction of whatever sort. We as developers are forced to think in terms of the system instead of the other way around. When I go to an ATM, the ATM should be designed for my convenience. It should not be the other way around. I should not open the number panel and then hack the chip and then get the money, right?
Yes.
So that's how all systems should be designed with the human brain in mind. It's very painful for the average developer to think in terms of map and reduce and pray God that his program works. So that is the main concern with Hadoop. A lot of people say they can defend saying that yeah, we can actually write using Pig or Hive. You guys have heard of Pig and Hive, right?
Yes, yeah.
So we can write using Pig and Hive. But why are we not using Pig and Hive? In fact, if Pig and Hive are around, we should not be writing MapReduce programs at all, right? Why do you do that?
Maybe it's not possible for all scenarios. Like we need to do some custom stuff.
Exactly. We need a lot of customization. In fact, even in Pig and Hive, after a couple of steps, we need to write a user-defined function.
Yes.
So that we have to enter MapReduce land. We have to write Java code. One more important thing is, even if you're writing basic functions like checking whether the date is greater than so and so, it is a lot about performance. The same code, the same program written in Pig versus the same program written in pure Java outperforms Pig or Hive any day. You guys agree with me?
Yes.
Yeah. So these are the reasons why we love Hadoop. It's great, it's cool, but it's painful to think everything in terms of MapReduce. So that's why Spark was invented. So Spark extends your MapReduce model and supports other types of computations which are iterative, which are stream processing, other things like graphs. Okay, so that is a need for Spark. Spark was developed independently of Hadoop. They didn't copy or they didn't do it at the same time. And the most important thing, like Xela, is being backward compatible. If you say Spark is a cool thing, and then we have to revamp all our infrastructure, and you tell this to your manager, he'll fire you, because they want to maintain backward compatibility at all cost. It's very costly to revamp something and write something from scratch. So Spark guarantees that, let us say that you have written a lot of Hadoop MapReduce programs, you can still run them and you can improve it using Spark. That is one promise which Spark gives you. Spark has got a few components which come built in along with it. Okay. So one is your Spark SQL. You can write native first-class queries in SQL directly in Spark. No problems. It will compile fast. It won't have any performance issues at all. I mean, compared to how you write your idiomatic Java SQL and Spark SQL will have the same performance. That's what I'm trying to say. And whatever Hive queries you have written, it is compatible with Spark. So again, backward compatibility. If you notice very carefully, one pattern which is followed across the open source community is they try to be as backward compatible as possible. They want to introduce a new framework and say you have to scrap off everything behind your back. It's very costly. From an industry perspective, if you're a manager, it seems very costly affair. Standard connectivity, meaning Spark SQL offers you connectivity with your standard components like JDBC, ODBC, etc. You guys know what is streaming? Heard of Storm? S-T-O-R-M, Storm. Okay, what is the difference between batch computing and stream computing? Yeah, exactly, real time. So stream computing is real time. One example would be you go to an e-commerce store and then you're just browsing at the new end of season sale section, and your website logs detect that this user from this IP has been doing this for like 10 minutes, and then your backend actually will process those logs and then generate a dynamic coupon and then give it to you when you refresh the page next time. This is an example of a stream processing. You can't do this in Hadoop because Hadoop operates in batch mode. Whatever task they want to do, they operate it in the background, they run it at low traffic times, maybe at midnight or something, and then generate the data and put it back in SQL tables. If you try to do the same e-commerce example using Hadoop, the user will get the coupon only the day after. That is not desirable. So Spark provides streaming built-in. It's a first-class component of Spark. So you can do streaming computations in Spark without switching frameworks. We do a lot of machine learning these days, right? You guys know that Mahout actually integrates with Hadoop, and you can run a lot of machine learning algorithms. So Spark also has its own library called mlib, which is a very essential Spark component, and it runs faster than MapReduce. That is one more bonus which you guys have got. And most of the common machine learning algorithms like least square fitting, regression test, naive Bayes, you guys have done machine learning. We'll be doing it in the course. I mean, some basic ML examples in Spark. So all these things are offered by Spark mlib library. And the best part is we can deploy it on existing Hadoop infrastructure. We need not, again, like I told, change the whole infrastructure. You guys have worked on HDFS, right? When you do Hadoop, you do all your operations in the distributed file system, right? So RDD is the Spark equivalent. It offers much improved interface to distributed file systems. It offers better fault tolerance as compared to HDFS in the sense that you can do it without replication. HDFS achieves it using using replication, but RDD can do it without replication. So that's a lot of save in disk space. The Spark library, you can operate it in Java, Scala, and Python. But mostly, most people who use Spark in the industry, they use it using Scala. That is the main reason this course has been clubbed with Scala, so that you can write efficient Spark programs in Scala. So that's the reason why we have clubbed both these courses into one. So that's a brief introduction about Spark, and we'll be seeing a lot of upcoming sessions about various components and a lot of example programs in all the three components, and real life case studies of how Spark is being employed in industry, mostly in Scala. This is apart from your regular Scala programs also, which we'll be writing. Like one of you guys told me that the syntax might be very different, but fear not. We'll be writing a lot of simple Scala programs which will eliminate your fear of syntax, and you'll become a better programmer. So